The reading from the 3rd chapter of John. And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but have eternal life. Indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Those who believe in him are not condemned, but those who do not believe are condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and people loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For all who do evil hate the light, and do not come to the light, so that their deeds may not be exposed. But those who do what is true come to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that their deeds have been done in God. This is a story of our faith.
For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who trusts in him may not perish but have eternal life. Whom do we trust? It's one of the key questions in life. My friend Doug, an avid canoeist, liked to run river rapids in the Bulkley Valley in times past, and he also taught canoe skills. One firm rule he had was never to place a husband and wife together in the same canoe, especially when they were venturing through a section of the river containing rapids. The person most usually charged with getting the craft downriver sits in the stern. The person in the bow, the front, paddles. In situations where both paddlers have the same skill and experience, the heaviest person usually sits in the stern. I leave you to imagine the allocation of spots for most couples. When being carried down the river and a giant boulder springs out of the churning water, instant communication between the bow and the stern requires complete trust in the decision. The matter of trust becomes critical in getting through the rapids and down the river of life. Put starkly, do I trust this person to guide me through this without killing us both? On this current stretch of our lives, most of us rely upon Dr. Bonnie Henry to get as many of us as possible through this COVID canyon. We trust that she can read the river, that she knows what the healthcare craft is capable of in dire circumstances, that the accumulated experience from dealing with SARS and Ebola provides her with muscle memory. She regularly consults with other guides and weather stations. We may grow weary of this seemingly unrelenting stretch of river, but most of us trust her and do our part. We are partly rational in our trust, but we also trust that which our hearts sense. Compassion and empathy that allows her to feel the pain of the struggle for many British Columbians. We trust that her prime purpose is neither judgment nor condemnation, but that we all should come through this time into a fuller life. We trust her graciousness. Trust grows when nurtured by grace. The most famous verse in the passage we read today from the Gospel of John is verse 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who trusts in him may not perish, but have eternal life. Many of us raised in the Christian family's more conservative side grew to understand this verse against a backdrop of blood and fire, of a God who sacrifices his Son to a painful and brutal execution because of our sin. The only hope for us was to believe that the death of Jesus somehow balanced the books. Yet this verse is not set within a framework of hell or damnation, blood or fire, In fact, the opposite is stated. God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but so that the world might be saved through him. The purpose of the gift of the Son, Jesus, is to get us down the river in better shape than when we started. The image of God sketched here is of a gracious God, a God who is not obsessed with tallying our mistakes, who accepts our anxieties and double thinking, who answers our fear not with a beat down but with an invitation. Trust me, will you? The impact of this frame of grace on the picture of life cannot be underestimated. During times of stress and uncertainty, some of us are prone to have moments where we might be a touch less than grateful, less forgiving of others or ourselves, more bossy, opinionated, even on things about which we don't really care. Grace lubricates relationships. Without grace, the gears of life grind and chafe, often filling us with hideous noise, and we become less than our best selves. Grace is more than being friendly, polite, or tolerant. Grace creates space, allows the other to be. Grace demonstrates respect for the other even when we may not understand the other. The gift of the temptation to be less recalls us to the life and relationships we deeply desire and which God dreams for us. My brother is on the autism spectrum and suffers from profound OCD. I see him twice a week and he phones at least a couple of times a day. A few weeks ago, I noticed that I was becoming less tolerant, more snippy, impatient, unkind even. I generated rationale, excuses for my behavior, until one day I seemed to realize that it was time to stop. Enough. Cool down, step away, dial back my impatience and frustration. I needed to let him breathe without judgment. A moment of grace for me and I hope for him. Perhaps these are primarily my temptations. I don't know. But I know that life is better, more abundant, more flexible, roomier when soaked in grace.